This is a complete audiobook reading of Prism of Lyra, published by Keith Priest and Lyssa Royal in 1989. Preface. From the earliest days in Earth's recorded history, there has been a bittersweet emotion that wells up within us as we gaze into the expanse of the night sky. Some of us long for the day when the human race can travel beyond the stars. Is it really just a hope for the future rather than a remembrance of our past? The information presented in this book is a compilation of years of insights, deductive reasoning, and channeling. Meticulous cross-referencing of various channels has been conducted, as well as research into a number of respected anthropological and metaphysical works. The reader may consider these ideas to be literal or symbolic, for the story is the same. There is no claim that this is the ultimate truth of our galactic family's emergence into this reality. If it works for you, use the insights given here as a catalyst for your own growth. If not, perhaps it can lead you one step closer to your own personal truth. One of the most important ideas to accelerate the human potential is the allowance of all truths to be a manifestation of the one truth, whatever it may be. Through this allowance emerges unification. If nothing else, let this book be fun to read, interesting, and stimulating to your imagination. Your belief is certainly not required, but your willingness to be an explorer is. This is an introductory book. Each chapter represents a different facet of an intricate tapestry and how the tapestry affects Earth. Through many discussions, the information has been honed down into a framework that will introduce the reader to a cast of characters. The cast is not complete. There are countless other members and dramas being played out throughout our universe. These characters have emerged as the ones who seem to matter most to the human drama here on Earth. Chapter 1. Dimensional Infusion. All consciousness and energy was once fused into an integrated whole. This whole was aware of aspects of itself, but in a different way from individualized consciousness. In Earth's present development, the self is recognized first, then society, and finally the whole, all that is, or God. Separation is still created. This separation from the source is an illusion. This illusion is a tool that provides the whole with all the necessary lessons and challenges it needs to experience in order to reintegrate back into the source. Before this fragmentation from the source, the whole existed in another octave of dimensional reality. From this realm of unification, portions of all that has wondered what it would be like to fragment and temporarily forget integrated existence. The force of this thought on such a mass level began to create a fragmentation. The illusion created from this fragmentation would be a challenging forgetfulness in which consciousness would need to create from its own divine nature the remembrance to once again unite. What has been termed creation is indeed this fragmentation, or, more descriptively, the dimensional infusion. The whole's initial curiosity about a fragmented existence actually created the reality itself. It required a shift in perspective, focus, or frequency. As part of the whole, aspects of the galactic family were partially responsible for laying out the blueprint that was to guide their development. Therefore, the statement "we are God" actually has viable meaning. The blueprint that was laid out contained many different ideas. It first held the notion that polarity and fragmentation would be the norm. The encoding in the blueprint provided the option of free will on the part of each fragment or soul. The challenge was in remembering that each consciousness possessed it. The more free will is used, the more divine memory is invoked. When faced with a polarized reality, free will becomes the liberator. When a soul forgets it possesses free will, the lessons become much more challenging, yet quite rewarding. Another idea present in this chosen blueprint was that fragments of the whole would be entirely responsible for their actions during this state of amnesia. Whether or not it was remembered, every action taken would generate a response from the universe. Some have called this karma. However, it is much more than an eye for an eye. Instead of punishments for negative behavior, there is always the option of expanding one's awareness. Therefore, in a sense, wisdom erases karma. Though this may sound like the rules for some kind of cruel cosmic game, the outcome has already been decided. With this in mind, it is not necessarily the destination that counts, but the journey along the way. It is literally how the game is played. Another blueprint agreed to was an etherically generated code built into the fabric of the universal tapestry. This code would allow bipedal, carbon-based humanoid forms to be the normal, naturally developing vehicle for the incarnation of human-type consciousness on planetary structures. This code exists on meta-atomic levels that science is just beginning to learn to measure. The symbology of polarity plays out in the human body form. The Earth human is symmetrical, with 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, ears, etc. The body is joined into a whole by a torso and a head. It was also decided that during the evolutionary development of humanoid forms within the Earth's galactic family, that the male and female polarities would manifest in separate but complementary body types. This serves as a reminder that in order to create, polarities must always be joined or integrated. The notion is widely held that an individual has a tendency to feel most at one when she is joined with another in love. What was the actual process of the dimensional infusion? There exists within the time-space fabric of the constellation Lyra what can be called a white hole. Compare this white hole to a prism. In passing a beam of light through a prism, one gets a spectrum of light fragmented into 7 visible color frequencies. When a portion of the whole passed through the prism of Lyra, the white hole, consciousness was fragmented into 7 vibratory frequencies that represent the mass consciousness of Earth's galactic family. Each fragment became conscious on all of these different frequencies or densities. Frequencies were previously experienced as being integrated into the whole like white light. When this portion of the whole passed through the prism, it manifested as 7 aware frequencies. Consciousness also fragmented, and the fragments moved away from each other as the Big Bang theory symbolically suggests. The illusion thus arose that each fragment was very, very alone. The whole understood that the purpose of this experience was to learn to reintegrate from a point of separation. But how? As individual souls or in groups, the fragments sought out the universe that was just created. The dimensional infusion not only created a consciousness fragmentation, but it also created the stars, planets, gases, and molecules that make up physical reality. However, physical reality represents only a few of the energy frequencies that emerged from the fragmentation. As science has discovered, matter is densified energy vibrating at a specific rate. Every aspect of the universe is made up of energy. In Earth technology, it has not yet been discovered how to measure certain portions of reality. If technology possessed this ability, an infinite number of gateways into time, space, and dimension would be seen. For the time being, the 7 frequency levels that Earth's galactic family fragmented into, by passing through the prism of Lyra, will be explored below. From this point forward, the term density will be used in reference to these frequency levels. First, density awareness as a point physical matter. This frequency level is the most basic. It provides the matter and energy for the creation of atoms and molecules. The basic life forms of mineral and water, for example, are all operating from first density frequency. Humans possess this frequency within themselves as well. It makes up the basic genetic codes. Second, density awareness as a line biological matter development of group or species identity. The consciousness expressed by second density vibration does not possess self-awareness or ego. Most species within the plant and animal kingdoms exist here, however, their placement in density depends upon many additional factors, including the presence or absence of ego. Third, density volumetric awareness ego loss of group identity, development of individual identity ability to remember past and cognize the future while retaining present awareness. This is the density where human beings emerge. It is a vibration that creates the illusion of separation and thus a challenge toward awakening. Presently, humanity is going through a transition period into fourth density reality, which can account for the many rapid changes the human race is undergoing. This is the frequency that expresses the most separation from the whole. It is from here that many lessons about integration are learned. This is the most intense of all levels in its cultivation of growth within the self. Cetaceans, dolphins, and whales presently exist simultaneously in third and fourth densities and are transitioning out of third along with humanity. The consciousness of primates exists in third density as well. The evolution of primates is becoming increasingly apparent as one begins to observe them displaying several characteristics that were once thought of as indigenous only to humans, such as language acquisition and pathological behavior. Fourth, density containment of volumetric awareness, superconsciousness, reintegration of group identity without loss of ego identity as vibration increases. Perception of past, present, and future become more fluid, along with the ability to interface with multidimensional and multidensity realities. Negatively oriented consciousness becomes more difficult to maintain. Presently on Earth, fourth density reality is overlapping third. In humanity's case, this can account for the increased desire for unity, peace, and unconditional love, as opposed to the illusion of separation that characterizes third density. The vibratory rate of one's reality is stepped up, and therefore one may be faced with personal issues in a much more rapid and intense way. It is easy to see how this is coming into play with the thousands of individuals upon Earth who are in therapy, in substance abuse programs, and engaging in humanistic efforts to better the planet. This is the frequency of responsibility. This is the frequency when one begins to remember the encoding of free will. This is the last frequency where physical bodies are the vehicles for the expression of consciousness. Hence, many civilizations choose to spend long periods of time within this density. Fifth density, experiential awareness of I as a group identity not bound by linear time. In this density, sentient consciousness begin to awaken to its heritage. This is the density of wisdom. As one awakens the wisdom within, they very often want to share it with those who are still focused in the lower densities. Many from this realm choose to become guides for others. A fifth density being merges with its family of consciousness, oversoul or higher self, if you will, and begins to remember. This is the first density in which a non-physical orientation is experienced. Note, there is no clear-cut distinction when transitioning from fifth to sixth and sixth to seventh densities. Because these densities are not physically oriented, there is much blending in these transitions. Sixth density, awareness as the dimension itself. This has often been called the Christ consciousness, in that it displays a frequency level equal to that of the Christ or Buddha. From this frequency, a total remembrance occurs, and one begins taking responsibility for the whole rather than the self. The process of progressing the self and progressing the whole become one and the same. Seventh density, awareness as the multidimensional experience group matrix identity social memory complex. This is the frequency of total oneness or integration. Those who vibrate to this frequency are merged in identity and become a mass conscious whole. They magnetize those in other frequencies and provide the current for the natural flow toward integration. Once the seventh density beings reach critical mass, they will progress through the Prism of Lyra from our point of view. It will then be a black hole exit point and reach the next octave, where another adventure awaits. It is important to note that as portions of the whole fragmented through the Prism of Lyra, each consciousness retained awareness on all density levels. However, part of the forgetfulness remained. From most highly focused density levels, such as third and portions of fourth, an unawareness may occur concerning the coexistence of other levels. As integration occurs, one becomes aware of these other aspects. The microcosm always reflects the macrocosm. This is visible in the coincidence of how atomic structure mirrors the structure of a solar system. It is the same with the fragmentation of portions of the whole into individual beings or soul groups. When one incarnates into a physical body, it can be likened to a mini passage through the Prism of Lyra. The process of soul fragmentation, as one incarnates physically, can be likened somewhat to Freud's ID, ego, and superego theories. As a fetus, the soul demonstrates a first density consciousness. At that point, one is aware of itself as intricately connected to the environment. Physically, one is a mass of DNA codes with the potential to become a conscious human being. Since Freud did not take his hypothesis into prenatal development, there is no correlation. If he were to have created a label that described the fetus relationship to its environment, then it would have been a first density description. When the child is between birth and 2 years old, she begins to demonstrate second density consciousness. A separation begins to be perceived between itself and the environment, and its desires become externalized. There is still somewhat of an egocentric point of view, which correlates this developmental level with the ID. What distinguishes a child's second density orientation from third density is the lack of a distinct ability to differentiate between itself and the environment. From approximately the second year of life onward, third density consciousness becomes the primary framework demonstrated. This is the development of the ego and the awareness of the child as a separate individual. These are crucial formative years. One can see that if development is disrupted, such as through abuse, the personality can fragment and perhaps create dysfunction later in life. Many individuals retain this third density consciousness orientation of ego throughout their entire lives. The development of the superego, or higher awareness, is a typical fourth density trait. Humans have the option to develop this aspect of themselves. This is a reintegration of the fragmentation of personality that occurs through the birth process, as well as integration on a spiritual level. As the human race begins to move more solidly into fourth density consciousness, it is suspected that this personality fragmentation process will become less apparent, and perhaps children will begin displaying fourth density characteristics earlier in their development and retain them throughout their lives. In childhood, one must learn how to adapt and integrate into a workable framework. If one cannot do this, such as in the instance of child abuse, psychological disorders will very often be displayed when adulthood is reached. Pathologies such as multiple personality disorder can occur because the natural third density personality integration process did not occur during childhood. Some extraterrestrial civilizations have learned to detect and transmute the seeds of pathological disorders during childhood and therefore have no incidence of adult pathologies. If it is understood that no matter how far an individual fragments, either on a soul level or in the personality, and that the way back home is always through integration, she will never lose sight of the goal. In this case, we can go home again. Chapter 2. Creation of the Galactic Family. In passing through the Prism of Lyra, the first fragmentation created a group of beings that can be called the Founders. 1. The Founders embodied the group consciousness of what eventually became humankind. They can project to a very high level of fourth density, but their natural state is non-physical. In splitting off from the portion of the whole that passed through the Prism of Lyra, they still retained a memory, if somewhat dreamlike, of the idea of integration and the purpose of the fragmentation. It is they who orchestrate humankind's evolution. They play the roles of the parent archetype, in male and female polarity balance. The Founders became aware of the blueprint that was chosen as they fragmented from the whole. From this blueprint, they knew that children carry the encodings of the parents. Since they played the parents' role, it was their responsibility to influence the growth of the new consciousness about to be created. In doing this, they became the blueprint, began to understand and live it, knowing that this would encode future fragments. The Founders began to understand the natural energy patterns of the polarized reality just created. It became obvious to them that the newly fragmented group consciousness interfaces with specific realities within 3 main points. 1. A point of pure positivity. 2. A point of pure negativity. 3. The integrative point of the two. All interactions occur within the lines that connect each point, with very few aspects of consciousness existing within the points of purity. This realization inspired them to understand a paradigm of polarized reality, which was something exciting and new to their understanding. The paradigm, as it emerged for them, is shown below in a 2-dimensional diagram. As they pondered the paradigm, they began to understand the mechanics of how the fragmented consciousness would once again merge back through the Prism of Lyra. The linear model above can be changed to bring about the triadic relationship of the template. Here is an illustration. This triad represents the probabilities of the integrative process. Civilizations naturally move randomly according to the laws of chaos within the triadic template until a balance of energy is reached. If a civilization or consciousness chooses integration, the willingness to grow from both polarities, they will naturally move toward the integrative point, fueled by the momentum of both polarities. This can be viewed as an allowing form of integration. If, on the other hand, a civilization or individual refuses integration, the template expands to accommodate their denial of the opposite polarity. The expanded template will not be outlined here at the present time. When they believed they were ready, the Founders began another fragmentation. Just as a portion of the whole became curious and created this realm from its thoughts, the Founders emulated their parents and exerted thought energy to create a fragmentation of themselves. This fragmentation occurred far and wide. Individualized consciousness sprang from the Founders' group awareness and began to explore the universe. Because of this fragmentation, Every being existing in the galactic family presented here is part of the founders. There are an infinite number of fragments and explorational journeys. Some of these fragments grew into civilizations that have played a part in the development of Earth. Some of those who have a reference point in Earth's known reality will be explored in the chapters ahead. When the founders fragmented, some allowed their energy to densify sufficiently in order to enter a physical reality. The founders had already chosen planets that could support humanoid life. Then they gently guided these fragments into a physical third or fourth density existence. After time had passed, the fragments became more accustomed to physical existence, and assistance from the founders who still existed in smaller numbers became less needed. The first area to be eventually colonized after the founders' fragmentation was in the general vicinity of the Lyra constellation. Most of the galactic family that is genetic. Connections to Earth has roots in the Lyran system. It was there that the first attempt at integration occurred. The founders thought that it would be easy and predictable. Instead, humanoid life forms spread outward exponentially until a very intricate tapestry was woven. The threads of the tapestry began to become tangled until eventually the origins of the thread became lost in the colorful maze of the tapestry's design. The following are the main characters displayed in this tapestry from the perspective of Earth. Lyra. The general area of the birth of the humanoid race. All humanoid races in our galactic family have genetic roots connected to Lyra. It is the symbolic harp upon which the song of humanity is played. Vega. A star within the constellation of Lyra. Descendants of Lyra. Vega birthed a race of beings who manifested Lyra's opposite polarity both in their beliefs and actions. There were frequent conflicts between the Lyran and vegan races. Apex planet. A planet within the Lyran system which was the first attempt at creating an integrated society. Sirius. A trinary star group. It is known in Earth mythology as the dog star. Sirius was one of the first areas to be colonized by beings from the Lyran star group. Sirius embodied the energy of the triadic template and perpetuated the drive toward integration. There is a large variety of consciousness types that incarnate in this system. Orion. This is the main battleground for the challenge of polarity integration, seeded from Sirius as well as Lyra and Vega. There is a direct connection with Earth, as explored in later chapters. Pleiades. Colonized by Lyran offshoots, this group is Earth's main genetic connection from extraterrestrial sources. Arcturus. An archetype or future self-ideal of Earth, Arcturus assists in healing personal and planetary consciousness. Its vibration, primarily sixth density, has been attributed to the angelic kingdom. Zeta Reticuli. This civilization is intimately connected with Earth. The Reticuli are the primary group instigating abductions, or more accurately called temporary detainments, since this group always returns the abductee. More will be said about this group in later chapters. Though some of these civilizations overlap each other in time and may not appear linear, below is a linear translation of the progression of various cultures in comparison to each other. Discussion. Once one recovers from the initial shock of the idea that extraterrestrials had something to do with Earth's heritage, it really seems like a very logical explanation. Why would the human race egotistically believe that it alone is responsible for Earth's genetic past? Upon Earth, races have discovered new races and have begun integrating with them, perhaps. Before this occurred, these races never knew the others existed. This model can hold true for the universe as well as planet Earth. How many more ancient drawings of rocket ships and their pilots need to be found before humans can break through the fears about discovering Earth's past? The most obvious question is this: if the extraterrestrials are out there, why don't they show themselves? An answer can be found in humanity's approach to anthropological studies upon Earth. Scientists do not go marching right into a primitive culture waving their cameras and equipment. These types of cultural assimilations sometimes take them decades to accomplish. In its own eyes, humanity may seem civilized enough. However, to a race that has achieved space travel and perhaps even global unity, humanity may seem primitive indeed. Perhaps they are waiting, hiding in the bushes, allowing only a few humans to see them until the signal goes out to the whole of society that they are not a threat. What if the signal that they are there never goes out to society? What if humanity continues to ignore the evidence, hoping it will all go away? To many of the extraterrestrials, this seems to be the case. All non-threatening methods seem to have been unsuccessful thus far. The primary game plan over the last few decades appears to be much more profound in its potential to awaken humanity. Some of Earth's visitors are now using fear. At times, society is so quick to validate negativity rather than positivity that humanity's own framework may now begin to be used to assimilate Earth to its previously denied reality. Fear awakens rather rudely at that. Perhaps that explains the growing observation of extraterrestrial abduction experiences as a method of awakening humanity to a greater reality. At humanity's level of development, a model for the natural evolution of a planet has not yet been formulated. It seems obvious that a civilization would not be able to reach the cosmos and the folding of space-time dimensions if it cannot resolve its conflicts on a planetary level. The expansion of consciousness required for such a leap may be dependent upon the unified whole. If the whole is not integrated and balanced, attempts may be fruitless. Humanity may be experiencing this limitation now, with so many unsuccessful space launch attempts as well as space program budget restrictions. Earth may just not be ready. Humanity wants to reach for the stars, but very often cannot even reach for the hand of its neighbor. The extraterrestrial connection is important, but what is even more important is developing a global perspective. Expansion will come from action, the claiming of responsibility for Earth by humanity itself. The extraterrestrials will not intervene to clean up humanity's mess. Earth is entering adulthood and has been kicked out of the nest. It would serve humanity to release its victimhood, claim its divine birthright, and create heaven on Earth. The extraterrestrials can only remind humanity of its unlimited potential. Their communication and our awareness of Earth's heritage can be likened to a dangling carrot. If the human race wants that carrot, perhaps it must do what needs to be done to get it unify and integrate. Chapter 3. The Womb of Lyra. From the point of view of a reality that can be perceived by physical beings, the form of the founders has 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, and a torso. They possess large, inquisitive eyes as a symbolic representation of their desire for knowledge and of the ancient memory they carry within them. Physical beings would view them as insect-like, very tall, and having long, graceful limbs. 3rd density humans can perceive them if they enter an accelerated version of 4th density. Interactions with them are usually able to occur in an altered state. From this state, they appear etheric and dreamlike. Having fragmented their consciousness further, the founders began solidifying energy into matter. This created a prototype physical race into which the majority of humanoid consciousness would incarnate. On meta-atomic levels, organizational codes exist which create a consistent humanoid-type body in a carbon-based environment as the vehicle for physical representation of consciousness. The founders used this naturally occurring code to assist them in creating versions of themselves in both physical and non-physical states. This form symbolically reflected the aspects of the polarized universe they had entered. Again, it is representative of the idea that parents create children in their own image. The founders are the energetic grandparents of the human race. It was their desire to manifest different dimensional aspects of themselves. This would produce root forms of life, which would facilitate the process of creating diversity within the new reality that was just born. They are both the source and the prototype. As they emerged into this light form through the densification of energy, they became aware that all life will once again evolve back into the founders and then into the source. Consciousness will scatter and fragment, sometimes beyond recognition, but it will evolve back into the source physically, as well as mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Thus the founders began the next step of the fragmentation process. Their first action was to begin making the plans necessary to spread life throughout the Lyran system. They were aware that over time the life forms would naturally gravitate into planetary civilizations by means of attraction. Planets were chosen within the Lyran star group to house these new races. As these planets naturally began to develop primate life, the founders seeded these developing primates with plasmic energy on meta-atomic levels within their DNA structure. This occurred over many generations until primates humanoids possessed the genetics necessary to sustain the higher vibrations of 3rd density consciousness. With slight alterations, the incarnation process was soon to begin on several planetary bodies. The founders fragmented themselves further in order to release the consciousness necessary to incarnate on these planets. As this fragmentation occurred, each consciousness was magnetized to a specific planet where the vibrations were more compatible with the individual fragment. As expressed in the previous chapter, the basic template of the consciousness that fragmented through the Prism of Lyra can be considered a triad. It represents one polarity, its opposite, and the integrative point. The founders observed this natural flow of energy emerging in the base species that were developing. These different planetary groups were initially homogeneous, not yet manifesting any single aspect of the template in an obvious way. As time went on and interactions between individuals and groups increased, many groups polarized into either negative or positive orientations. Some groups began to display varying degrees of integration. This scenario was expected by the founders. However, the process began to take on a life of its own. As the process grew exponentially, the founders began to see the infinite reflections of the whole, and to some extent it became overwhelming to them. As these groups evolved and achieved space travel, they exposed themselves to the development of other planetary groups in the area. Cultures began to mix and grow. New philosophies were born. For a period of time, the Lyran races rapidly developed advanced technology, expansive philosophy, and strong social development due to the interactions between these planetary cultures. Then the dynamics of the template began to be displayed. Polarities began to solidify, generating their own polarization that continued exponentially in turn. Negative polarities began splitting and manifesting their own negative-positive poles. Positive poles did the same. The feminine expressed its masculine, and the masculine expressed its feminine. Polarities exploded like viruses within the previously blossoming civilization. The simple set of mirrors that the founders had created shattered into infinite fragments. They had lost direct contact with many of the genetic windows physical beings that they had created. The physical beings had now taken on lives of their own, although the original programs continued to be an underlying factor influencing their development. The first group to develop as a specific non-Lyran species was the vegan civilization. They formed a highly distinctive philosophy and spiritual orientation and began to isolate themselves from the Lyran races. They were initially a negatively oriented civilization, expressed as the negative pole of Lyra, because they had adopted a philosophy of service to self. Contraction. Lyra itself may be considered the positive pole because all other civilizations were born out of its expansion. As time passed, friction grew between the people of the Lyran races and the vegan civilizations. Neither group was progressing in an integrative way. Both possessed within themselves the conflict of polarity. Neither group was right or wrong. They all played out the same ideas, only from a different perspective. They just could not understand how to balance their energies. Polarization continued to grow exponentially as they grappled with their relationships between their civilizations and themselves. A third civilization began to emerge from the Lyran races. Because this planet was the apex of a symbolic triangle of integration, playing out both negative and positive polarities, it can be called the apex planet during this stage of its development. Later, it becomes a much more intricate piece of this galactic puzzle. The apex planet began its civilization by drawing in characteristics from both the Lyra and Vega polarities. Genetically, they were a mixture. Within their race, diversity was even more widespread than upon our present Earth. There were dark and light-skinned people, pacifists and conquerors, artists, musicians and soldiers. Even in comparison to our Earth race, they did not coexist peacefully at all. Separation began occurring in the culture until the entire planet was engulfed in the friction of polarity. No resolution was in sight. The future of this apex planet seemed hopeless. They eventually allowed pollution and weaponry to nearly destroy their world. When opposite polarities are forced, not integrated, they cause fusion. This fusion manifested on the apex world as nuclear war. A small number of inhabitants secured themselves underground, but the remainder perished from their own inability to integrate. What occurred on a planetary scale was quite interesting. From a point of observation in space, it appeared that the planet destroyed itself. From the point of view of the survivors who went underground, they were very much alive. As a result of their nuclear explosions, their planet was eventually propelled into an alternate dimension. After the cataclysm, radiation upon their world remained quite high, which forced them to stay underground. Once they recovered from their emotional shock, it became time to pick up the shattered pieces of their lives. Their development and their amazing transformation will be explored in further chapters, for they play a vital role not only in the transformation of planet Earth, but of the galactic family and the founders as well. Meanwhile, the Lyran races and the vegan civilizations were continuing with their development. Groups of Lyrans wished to remove themselves from the friction with Vega and sought out many other areas to colonize. Groups of vegans also escaped their planet's conflicts and founded a number of civilizations including Altair and Centauri. Gone were the clear-cut lines of traceable philosophic and genetic history. Humanity was spreading quickly, carrying with it the seeds of experience and polarity. The goal was always buried deep within the souls of each being, and it gently nudged them onward. The goal was, and still is, integration. It is apparent that the beginnings of the entrance into polarity by the founders was not easy. They had created an equation that they expected would conclude according to their calculations. As with the new science of chaos, the movement of energy between these three civilizations, Lyra, Vega, and Apex, became unpredictable to the founders. The entire galactic family could only wait and watch, knowing that in chaos there is order, divine order. These early lessons have been imprinted into humanity's etheric memory as a reminder of all that it has been and all that it can become. Humanity is never alone in this struggle. The founders still wait silently. They exist not only out there but also within the soul of humanity as its most basic archetype. The cycle of life and existence is merely a circle. The beginning and end are the same. When humanity feels the call of evolution, it is the founders whispering through the expanse of time and dimension. They are a part of humankind speaking to itself. Perhaps it is time to listen. Chapter 4. The Sirius Factor. The realm of Sirius was one of the first to be explored by the curious consciousness that passed through the Prism of Lyra and fragmented from the founders. Sirius represents a very important symbol for the entire galactic family, that of the Triad. Though it has not been scientifically validated by most astronomers, Sirius is a trinary star group. 1 Symbolically, this represents the template two polarities at the base of a triangle and the joining or integrating of the polarities at the apex. It reflects the basic foundation of the galactic family's desire to once again unify through the merging of polarity. After the infusion, many consciousnesses who chose to remain non-physical attracted themselves to the realm of Sirius. Here they began laying the physical as well as non-physical groundwork for the vital role Sirius was to play in the unfolding drama. They were to become some of the earliest genetic and etheric engineers, following in the footsteps of the founders. Anticipating what was to come, these non-physical Sirians began forming through the transmutation of energy into matter a third density world that would eventually be able to support physical life. They also created more vibrationally focused realms for the consciousnesses that would choose to exist there in the non-physical state. Thus, because of their ability to create realms suitable for all manifestations of consciousness, they became known as the Elders of Sirius. During the Lyran and vegan conflicts, representatives from both polarities inhabited the Sirius realm with the desire to integrate there. The Elders of Sirius prepared for an influx of both positive and negative energy. They were quite aware of the scenario that needed to occur. The vegans who chose to inhabit the Sirius realm decided to incarnate physically within a third density reality. Culturally, they were highly polarized in the masculine, and their philosophy was one of domination, which was becoming more difficult to maintain in fourth density. They felt they must dominate their environment and control their evolution. According to them, this would allow them a mastership of their realm, and from that point their evolution would then progress at an accelerated pace. From this desire, the vegans began plans for their colonization of a planet orbiting one of the Sirius suns. If they were to maintain their philosophic orientation of domination, the natural polarization inherent in this philosophy could only be perpetuated in a third density existence. They were to be tightly focused in the physical, creating a veil of illusion and forgetfulness even more dense than presently on Earth. They were so sure of their own abilities and so unaware of the lure of third density separation that they zealously began speeding up the evolutionary process of the primate-like species developing on the world they had chosen. As soon as the DNA of the indigenous species matched their desire, they began incarnating. Almost immediately, these new Sirians lost their memory connection with Vega. The veil was too dense. Their desire to create forgetfulness was so strong that they remembered nothing of their origin. They did not dream. They did not meditate. They did not pursue creative activities except to maintain their structure of domination. When their zealousness translated into physical reality, it created a culture driven by the desire for domination over each other and the universe around them. As this negative Sirian planet was developing, a group from Lyra decided to venture outward into the Sirius system. These beings chose to remain in the non-physical realms. Their orientation was polarized toward the idea of service to others. They were particularly interested in the physical healing of those in pain. The combination of the negative Sirians who denied their spiritual self and the positive, non-physical Sirians originally from Lyra who felt it was their duty to heal all those in pain created a dynamic of tension that echoed throughout the Sirius system and beyond. The saga began. The positives began bombarding the negatives with love and healing energy on the subconscious and unconscious levels. Because the negatives were so tightly focused, this created psychological pain for them. The more the negatives resisted, the more the positives sent healing energy. Friction occurred from this interaction that was very uncomfortable for all consciousness in the Sirius system. The elders of Sirius finally intervened. It was decided that the conflict would once again be moved to another locale. This time integration would be attempted from a slightly less polarized perspective. The elders sought out a home for this conflict. It did not take them long to discover the electromagnetic properties of the area called Orion. Thus the myth begins of how Sirius, the dog star, leads the way for the hunter Orion. Once the initial conflict was removed from the Sirius system, the physical civilization remained. They had cut themselves off from spirit even to the point of death, where an immediate reincarnation into the system occurred again, further alienating them from any form of non-physical existence. Therefore, most of the negative society was unaware of a conflict, so they could not be made aware of its movement into the Orion system. There, society continued within its haze of forgetfulness. Those desiring the negative-positive integration now went to Orion from Lyra Vega instead of to Sirius. Sometimes, very infrequently, a soul would awaken from the negative Sirius world and progress to the Orion arena. From the positive non-physical Sirius perspective, they would now be able to directly influence the ailing negatives. Many joyously ventured to Orion to carry out this task. Others chose to remain within the Sirius realm, concentrating their healing abilities toward other goals. Other positives from Lyra joined the Orion struggle. Galactic history was born. Because of the positive Sirians' desire to facilitate physical healing, their service to physicality instead of choosing incarnation, they allied themselves with the energies of Arcturus. Arcturus is oriented toward the idea of emotional healing. Together they form the Sirius-Arcturus matrix. This matrix has found its way onto nearly every physical planet within the galactic family as a holistic energy representing the healing of body, mind, and spirit. Planet Earth has known the Sirius-Arcturus matrix in many forms. It is an archetypal energy that is used by an individual or society for many purposes. It is malleable and can be shaped into any appropriate definition. Whatever the shape, it is devoted to the service of physicality. The Sirius-Arcturus matrix reminds the fragments of their connection to the whole and their natural abilities for self-healing. Though it is only a small percentage, a group of positive Sirians decided to incarnate into physicality as well. However, they rejected the humanoid form for a form that is more representative of their nature. This form is the cetacean. Dolphins and whales represent a translation of Sirius energy upon a physical, polarized world. In archetypal symbology, water represents the subconscious. Cetaceans are there silently in Earth's oceans and in the sea of humanity's subconscious. They remain as a reminder of humanity's potential for integration. Of all the energies that are a part of the immediate galactic family, the Sirius energy is the most widely used upon Earth. The name Sirius means the sparkling one or the scorching one, also called the dog star, and the Nile star perhaps because it is the brightest and the second nearest star visible to Earth, 8.7 light-years away. Many ancient cultures recognized the importance of the Sirius energy, most notably the Egyptians. At times, Sirius consciousness may choose to densify its frequency to become visible to third-density humans. During many of the Egyptian dynasties, it was quite common to have a visitation from a Sirian in the disguise of one of their gods, such as Isis, Osiris, and Anubis. These costumes made it easier for the Egyptians to honor their presence, and often the visitations triggered memories of the very early days when the gods walked openly upon Earth. These Sirians gave the Egyptians, as well as other Earth cultures, much advanced astronomical and medical information. Even today, scholars are still questioning the origin of this information. Halfway across the globe, the Mayan culture had its own unique relationship with Sirius. Advanced medical practices and galactic astronomical information were imparted to them that presently have not been unraveled by modern scholars. Theirs was a much more personal relationship with Sirius. These Mayans were, in a sense, tourists from the Sirius realm incarnate here on Earth, who wanted to experience physicality from a closer vantage point. Their relationship with the Mayans was so intimate that the Sirians actually shared with them the technology of transmutation from matter to pure energy consciousness. When their lessons were complete, the Mayan race vanished transmuted, leaving behind a trail for humanity to follow. These Sirians left behind many time capsules and puzzles for future generations to discover. One of these puzzles is the crystal skull. The crystal skull can represent the infinite nature of man and consciousness. Looking into its depths, one can sense the past and future. Humans have not yet learned how to translate the data and emotions that are triggered when one gazes into its expanse. Perhaps one day information encoded within the skull may ignite sparks of memory within humanity, as the Sirians have possibly intended. They are one of the primary groups who, in many forms, have left the clues about Earth's past. It is important to note that the Sirians are not meant to be spoken about as a group of extraterrestrials as much as a group consciousness expressing itself both physically and non-physically. They have been a guiding force for the developing civilization upon Earth. As will be explored in later chapters, they are one of the primary characters in the creation of the human species on Earth. Returning now to the negative Sirius planet, Earth has an analogous translation of its philosophy. The practice that is called black magic or the dark arts is rooted in the philosophy of the negative Sirians. Within the Egyptian culture, the organized worship of the negative force took place within the temples and priesthoods of Set. This philosophy rejects the idea of re-inclusion into the universal fabric. Those that practice this philosophy consider themselves unique, separate, and egocentric. The illusion that they have created is one of non-responsibility for their actions. It often takes them many lessons, and sometimes many lifetimes, to recognize that their actions and their beliefs create the very reality from which they are trying to escape. In translation, another manifestation of the Sirius influence on Earth from a slightly negative perspective is the Illuminati. The Illuminati are a group of physical and non-physical negatively oriented, and even some positively oriented extraterrestrials who came to Earth as physical beings during the inception. These beings eventually felt they did not get the recognition or power they thought they deserved. Many of these early off-planet consciousnesses who interacted with humanity had allowed their energies or their histories to evolve and become an archetype to assist Earth. The idea of control is their identity. If they cannot control others, they feel as if they do not exist ... and they are terrified of non-existence. This motivation has caused them to attempt to interfere in Earth's development from the start. As with an annoying insect, they are a bother, but rarely cause serious problems. Only the individuals who have no sense of their own power will be found in those power structures upon Earth that stem from fear of powerlessness. They cannot be an influence if one does not allow them to be. It all comes back to the issue of claiming one's own power. One final idea concerning contemporary manifestations of the Sirius energy has to do with the appearance of menacing extraterrestrials as seen in UFO literature. For the most part, severely negative UFO experiences, cattle mutilations, and the men in black phenomenon are connected to the negative Sirius and Orion group, who actually generate more fear than damage. At times, the physical Sirians and Orions can break through the layers of protection in the solar system and try to wreak havoc. What is their motivation? In exploring the ancient Sumerian texts concerning early history and the nature of the conflicts of the gods, one gets a clear idea that Earth in whole, or in part, was involved with issues of territorial dispute by various groups at different times. The question has often been asked why the Sirians seem to be so involved in Earth's development. If it is indeed true that Sirius is a trinary star group, as the Dogon tribe's astronomical traditions suggest, could it be that Sol, Earth's sun, is, or once was, the third star? If that is the case, Earth may have been part of a territorial dispute among the Sirians from its very inception. This could explain why the negative Sirians consider it to be their right to do as they wish on Earth, and why they point an accusing finger at other extraterrestrials for wrongly interfering with Sirian internal affairs, thus creating many historical disputes. The Sirians may consider Earth to be part of their territory. In present time, Sol is only 8.7 light-years away from the Sirius system, which has been considered by astronomers to be part of our local star family. Many of the early Sirians were quite adept at genetic engineering. During the Earth inception, the physical Sirians placed a latent DNA code within the early humans. When Earth beings reach a certain vibratory frequency as a race, this code will be triggered. This code will assist those on Earth in remembering humanity's galactic past. Contemporary negative Sirians are terrified of this. They have continually kept themselves from transitioning into fourth density for fear of non-existence. They fear that if Earth transitions, they will transition also and cease to exist. They believe if they keep society in fear, Earth will not be able to make the shift. As a whole, they cannot determine humanity's fate, for Earth humans have more power than the negative Sirians realize. But they will continue. They know no other way. Whether dealing with physical extraterrestrials or archetypal energy, the Sirian identity is entwined with humanity's. It is rich with knowledge as well as challenge. One must always remember Sirius as the triad and what it represents: integration from polarity, which is the destiny of Earth. Chapter 5. The Winds of Orion. When two opposite polarities meet, they are naturally attracted. When they attempt fusion rather than integration, they produce a force of enormous energy. They produce sparks. They produce change. Sometimes they even produce pain. This was the case with the civilizations of Lyra that attempted integration within the Vegan and Sirius star systems. The conflict began playing out there but was energetically expanded to include Orion. Its beginnings were as a Lyran conflict. Through generations it evolved into a new race's war, that of the Orions. As generations passed, each side lost touch with what they were fighting for. Yet the anguish continued. The stakes were clearly marked. The negative side perpetuated the idea of service to self. Within their philosophy, if one served the self, the whole was served. What they did not realize was that they were denying the whole by the way they chose to carry out this philosophy. This translated as the need for domination. These were dark times indeed. Domination entailed behavior that Earth humans have never experienced. Genetic manipulation of bloodlines was common, in an attempt to dilute or concentrate power. What humans know as black magic was a common practice. Beings were so saturated with their own fear that they struck out at all who were different. The Earth legends of sword and sorcery are dim remembrances carried in the etheric cell memory from the dark times of Orion. The positive side epitomized the idea of service to others. It was their belief that the only way to survive was to be subservient, even at the expense of the self. So an interesting dynamic was played out. There were those individuals who were the dominators and those who were all too willing to play the victim role. These positives felt that to support the whole they must serve the whole and relinquish the self. In reality, they were denying themselves as being a valid portion of that whole. The Orion civilization was one of the very few that evolved into a state of technological advancement while still being in a state of intense spiritual conflict. Eons of time passed while the drama continued playing out. It began with basic emotional manipulation all the way to the other end of the spectrum, manipulation using highly advanced technological tools. Reincarnationally speaking, the same souls incarnated time and again, switching sides, trying to find a way to bring the whole struggle into balance. Within Orion history, there has always been underground resistance. Throughout the ages, its strength ebbed and flowed like the pulses of their red giant Betelgeuse. Usually they would be discovered by the negatives, disbanded, and punished. Any time they built up some momentum, it radiated too loudly and they were found. As the philosophy of the resistance solidified, it became apparent that they needed to squelch the radiation of their ideas. They decided instead to symbolically absorb. They allowed people to come to them. They became like a black hole which was unable to be seen, but the force and momentum of their energy was as powerful as a silent wind. Their organization was thus called the Black League. The symbol of their struggle became the Black Dragon. A new aspect of the drama began to unfold. Now there were three facets to the struggle. There were the dominators, the victims, and the resistance fueled by the friction of two polarities. The Black League became quite successful in thwarting the efforts of the dominators known as the Orion Empire. However, it was only enough to reduce their momentum to a standstill. An energy impasse was reached. Within the souls of these repressed people existed a great desperation. They knew the extent of the Orion Empire's control. The Empire had devised ways to control astral bodies. Death was no longer freedom. Many individuals studied with heretic teachers to learn the ancient knowledge of dimensional consciousness travel. Few were successful, but those who were found a way out of the Orion system forever. Through focused concentration and disengagement from the Orion mass conscious belief systems, a small percentage of individuals were able to leave their bodies, die, and successfully target or home in on beings who had escaped or were reincarnated on Earth from Orion. Once these beings were targeted, the Orion entity was able to create a window through which she could travel. When she came through that window and incarnated on Earth, that being became lost in the Earth mass consciousness. This was a safety mechanism. If they did not know their own identity, they could not be pursued by the Orion Empire. The escapees then entered Earth's reincarnational cycle and most likely continued to play out the Orion drama unconsciously within their soul patterns. At times they could have been immediately pursued through the window by Orion Empire representatives. Often these Empire representatives became caught in Earth's mass consciousness as well, and had to enter the reincarnational cycle. When they incarnated, they carried their old Orion desire for control with them. As the desperation grew, the Black League decided to fight even harder. They had people who played both sides. Smuggled reports from informants resulted in an even more intense resistance effort. They began to employ tactics borrowed from the dominators. All this was done in the name of freedom. They eventually learned that freedom was elusive, and the conflict intensified. With all of their efforts, the Black League could not understand why they were not being successful in liberating the victims. They became discouraged. The people hungered for a form of spirituality, but all that was present was a gnawing emptiness and fear. Nothing worked. For a few generations, the Black League remained stagnant, only an idea and nothing more. Then something miraculous occurred. During generations of spiritual gestation, a seed began to grow. A soul incarnated who embodied all the hopes and dreams of the Orion races and had none of the hatred or fear. When he was born, he was safely contained in an energetically and emotionally neutral environment deep within the planet, so he would not become polarized. At adulthood, he began to teach. What he taught began to shed new light on the struggle. What he proposed could end it once and for all. He taught universal laws. Positivity cannot be achieved through negativity. The Black League was fighting fire with fire, only creating a blaze instead of peace. One must integrate positivity and negativity to the balance point. One must love, not fear. The idea of peace and freedom must be loved so much that one is willing to live it in one's soul, despite outside manifestations. The Black League thus learned that their intentions were good, but their actions only caused more of what they despised. This realization occurred on mass levels. It opened new doors of spirituality for the people of these oppressed worlds. They had a long way to go, but at least they now knew where to start. Once the dynamic began to be understood from higher levels, it was decided that they would transmute this energy by moving outward into the galaxy and starting fresh. From these higher levels, they called upon the founders to assist them in choosing a world. Of primary concern was an assurance that all the tools were provided on this new world for these adventurous beings to begin transmutation of the Orion energy. Free will choice was the primary tool, as well as a latent DNA code that would trigger a desire for societal preservation when if it became possible for them to self-destruct. The world that was chosen was Earth. The founders then began engaging various physical groups to carry out the Earth inception. See Chapter 9. Earth has manifested the Orion drama in an attempt to balance polarity throughout humankind's history. The fall of Atlantis, the Roman Empire, and the ongoing religious wars are all examples of memory patterns from Orion that are emerging to be cleared. Throughout all of these dramas, the human race has survived and has kept total oppression at bay. Humanity continues to play out the same dynamic: victims, perpetrators, and resistance. However, this time light is beginning to spread, and even the resistance is beginning to learn early on that one can't fight fire with fire. The contemporary Orion civilization, existing in the same time continuum as present-day Earth, has already healed its conflict, because Earth is still playing out Orion's past in an attempt to balance it for itself. The primary contact humanity receives from Orion has been judged to be negative. The Men in Black phenomenon, as well as some manifestations of the Illuminati structure, are playing out the past Orion need for control. The Men in Black MIBs have several origins. Some are human incarnations from Orion and/or negatively oriented Sirius energy. Others are actual past Orions who have traveled forward in time to present-day Earth. These include Empire representatives who were caught in Earth's mass consciousness. As they pursued Orion escapees, they perceive Earth as a threat. From their point of view, as humanity awakens and liberates itself, it magnetizes the oppressed Orion beings to seek freedom here. They want to keep these windows of opportunity closed for the victims of Orion, keep Earth unempowered, and stay in total control. The MIBs are only one manifestation of this idea. Generally, it is played out on Earth in a much more subtle way. Those individuals who carry the oppressive patterns from Orion act from their soul memory and are not necessarily conscious in their desire for absolute control. In researching 20th century MIB encounters, one comes across the ironic behavior of these beings. They function at a very autonomous level and seem to never claim for themselves the power that they so single-mindedly attempt to wrest from humans. This may suggest that the MIB is only a pawn in perhaps an even more bizarre power struggle. The Orion drama is not an experiment done to someone by someone else. All those who choose to be a part of the Earth transmutation do so through their free will. This transmutation integration will affect the entire galactic family created through the dimensional infusion. This would initiate the beginning processes of the integration back through the Prism of Lyra. The integrated polarities can thus be termed the Orion light. There were stages built into the transmutation project from which the founders would be able to gauge its progress. The first stage was a simple seeding and developing of third-density life into a strong genetic strain on Earth. The subsequent stages involved various developments of civilization. The crucial stage is occurring presently upon the Earth, the mass reawakening of millions of souls to a greater spiritual purpose. This awakening occurs naturally and begins to accelerate a widening of the gap between the positive and negative poles as seen presently within society. The accentuation of this gap serves to polarize and highlight the choices society may take, making it clear that choices must be made at this point in time. Humanity does not have the ugliness and pain of a tormented past to the extent that the Orions had. As Earth reawakens, all the tools become visible for humanity to claim responsibility for the whole and the self. The painful Orion memories may continue to surface, but the healing of them will occur through humanity's proclamation of freedom and choice. When the dimensional infusion occurred, there were some individual and group consciousnesses who chose to remain dormant. They allowed themselves to serve as archetypes and could be awakened as needed. Some even allowed fragments of themselves to incarnate. An example of this is the consciousness known as Merlin. During the time of the Orion drama, the friction between the two polarities awakened the sleeping magician. He became a guiding force in the drive to integrate from both a physical and a non-physical point of view. Fragments of his consciousness would incarnate intermittently to spark a memory of the past and a vision of the future. He is gone by many names on many worlds, but he always mirrors one's own beauty as well as one's ugliness. His energy has been present in association with Earth right from the inception. The Earth inception will be examined more thoroughly in the coming chapters. For the time being, it must be shared that this drama has been created to be a success. Most who incarnate upon Earth are involved to varying degrees in the Orion drama. Everyone is here by choice. The instant that one begins operating from a belief that humanity is here against its will is the instant that personal and planetary power has been surrendered. The Orions had the capability to target Earth individuals in Earth's past, present, and future. Chapter 6. Earth's Pleiadian Cousins. During the early development of the Lyran system, the first friction between polarities began to occur. Some Lyrans manifested the idea of the feminine polarity intuitive and allowing. They believed the path to reintegration was through inner development. Other Lyrans, however, polarized to the masculine. Their philosophy upheld the notion that in order to evolve, they had to dominate the known universe. This caused much dissension between the two. As the Lyran civilization developed, a group of Lyrans decided they would prefer to develop their culture away from what they perceived were negative influences. Thus, they searched the galaxy for a new home. In their search, they found a young planet rich in natural resources. This planet was Earth. For several generations, this group resided on Earth, coexisting peacefully with the developing primate race. However, over a long period of time, they found that they were not adapting to Earth's physical and electromagnetic environment as well as they desired. During this time, they incorporated small amounts of genetic material from the primates to assist them in assimilating to Earth's environment. Over generations, their DNA changed slightly, allowing them to become more adapted to Earth. While these Earth Lyrans were incorporating primate genetics into themselves, other groups of Lyrans were on the planet to carry out the founder's wishes, as well as their own, by inserting Lyran genetics into the primates. The arrival of these Lyrans refueled the conflicts the Earth Lyrans initially escaped from, so they chose to find another planetary system to colonize. Desiring to build a new culture where they could become isolated from old conflicts rooted in their past, they explored the region widely before they decided on an open cluster of young blue stars known as the Pleiades. When the Pleiadian star system began to be colonized by Earth Lyrans, it was intended to be a very balanced, independent race. This was reflected in their choice of a new, stable star cluster. More than anything else, they desired to create a culture based on harmony, truth, and unconditional love. Once the colonization plan became known, those of Lyran descent who desired a new home decided to colonize other areas of the Pleiades star cluster as well. These early Pleiadians, the previous Earth Lyrans, possessed highly developed intuitive skills, as well as an inbred desire to create a community lifestyle. The whole was as important as the self. Even with this desire, it took these beings generations to mature and create their own identity separate from their Lyran roots. For generations, they developed this new culture which was philosophical in nature and technologically progressing at a rate perfect for their development. Though there were several periods of conflict, the cultural base that these new Pleiadians created remained stable for many thousands of years. Over generations, the community-oriented Pleiadians began to favor peace and tranquility so much that they learned to invalidate all forms of negativity. Deeper and deeper, they submerged their natural humanoid tendencies, until a great emptiness appeared within their being. There was no conflict, resolution, or learning. A voice cried out from within them. There was a portion of them that desired to be heard. From this well of despair, they reached out to their Lyran forefathers. When the call was answered, the Lyrans were surprised to find a culture that had virtually cut itself off from creation. The Pleiadians had no knowledge of what was occurring in the universe around them. They were unaware of the anguish of Orion, even though they were both descendants of Lyra. When the Pleiadians were made aware of the Orion struggle, their own sleeping dragon awakened. They felt a passion. Once again, they felt alive. A deep mission was sparked within their souls. They offered to be of service within the Orion struggle. It was then that they committed themselves to fighting the Orion negativity. Thus it began. They entered the Orion struggle through many vehicles. Some souls chose to incarnate directly into the system within both polarity orientations, positive and negative, in order to understand the struggle. The majority of these Pleiadians incarnating into the Orion struggle became ensnared. It is easy to enter the Orion reincarnational cycle, but virtually impossible to escape. Others chose to ally themselves with the Black League or continue to incarnate within the Pleiadian system and attempt to contain the expansion of the Orion Empire. They fought with every ounce of their being against the negativity they saw around them. Unconsciously, they also fought the negativity still further within themselves. The struggle continued. The Pleiadians fought as zealously against the Orion negativity as they did their own latent shadow selves. Instead of finding a truth within, they only perpetuated their hatred of their own negativity. It was only when the Orion Empire destroyed one of their populated planets that they disengaged themselves actively from the Orion struggle. The lifeless, charred planet still stands in their system as a reminder of their past actions. When that planet was obliterated, the Pleiadians were devastated. Finally, an impasse was reached. On the highest levels of being, every consciousness involved in the Orion drama took a step back. They evaluated the situation. It became obvious that the resolution needed to occur from a different angle. They agreed to extend the conflict to another arena within the galaxy. The Pleiadians were faced with a choice: would they return their energies to their home worlds, or would they agree to resolve their own issues as well as the Orion struggle once and for all? Initially, they chose to return home. This allowed them to gather their strength and search the very depths of their souls to find a way to become whole. They were so afraid of the negativity that they became immobilized. They waited. They pondered ... and they faltered. While they waited, the Inception project began in full force upon the Earth. The Lyrans were the physical directors of the project under the founders, accepting assistance from other physical groups such as the Sirians. It quickly became apparent that they needed a genetic structure of terrestrial as well as extraterrestrial origin for their Inception project. They contacted the Pleiadians. At first, the Pleiadians expressed reluctance about becoming involved with Earth once again. However, the Lyrans pointed out possible Pleiadian benefits with a deft craftiness. Knowing that the Pleiadians had originally incorporated Earth primate genetics into themselves, the Lyrans admitted that they needed certain aspects of Pleiadian DNA for the developing Terran species on Earth. Unknowingly, they also created a way for the Pleiadians to face their negativity once and for all. It was proposed that a DNA transfer from the Pleiadians into the Terran species over a long period of time would create a race of humanoids who would be terrestrial but would also have extraterrestrial roots. The closest ancestors of these Earth humans would be the Pleiadians, and through these family ties the Pleiadians would be allowed to be involved with the Earth species development. During this involvement, they would observe the developing race, interact intermittently in order to keep them on course, and learn about human negativity. This vicariously would heal the pain of the Pleiadian past. After some reluctance to associate once again with the Lyrans, a group of Pleiadians finally agreed. From this agreement came thousands of years of Pleiadian interaction with nearly every primitive culture upon the Earth. Drawings of space beings and spacecraft adorn many cave walls, and many ancient documents record the actions of these gods who came from the sky. They saw themselves as gods no more than today's humans do. However, from the point of view of a primitive people, they surely must have seemed like gods. During certain developmental stages of a humanoid species, it is common to give up personal power to a godlike or magical figure. This became widespread, and soon the Pleiadians began to relish the power they were given. They began to wield it. Some began using fear in order to manipulate. Their soul-level agreement to learn from the developing Earth transformed into a satiation of personal desire. Many ancient myths concerning jealous gods are directly linked to these extraterrestrial beings from other systems, including the Pleiadians. When these power binges occurred, it was necessary for these extraterrestrials to be reminded of their purpose. Very often resentment built up on the part of the Pleiadians toward other visiting groups. For a period of a few thousand years, the Pleiadians grew in power, and then were consistently reminded of their place. The irony of the situation soon became known to them. They had wished to get in touch with their negativity. Their wish had been granted. During these interactions, the Pleiadians involved with Earth were all from the same time continuum. Their contacts were consistent with their development. They had not yet mastered the complex technology of time-space manipulation. It wasn't until the 20th century that Earth has begun to pull in Pleiadian contact from many different time frames simultaneously. Though contact continued intermittently until the present day, it has slowed in comparison to earlier times. Most Pleiadians no longer consider Earth humans to be children, and they allow humanity to make its own choices. Once Earth began its technological era, it was watched very closely for the critical mass necessary to activate the DNA code for preservation of the species. Since the 1940s, both physical and non-physical extraterrestrials have been monitoring humanity and attempting communication, mostly in subtle ways. The Pleiadians were the first to begin a major benevolent contact program physically with Earth. Although this was quietly carried out as early as the 1930s, it began to be noticed on a wider scale in the 1970s. A Swiss named Billy Meyer has documented hundreds of hours of communication with the Pleiadian cosmonaut Semjace. He also possesses a large number of photographs of the Pleiadian spacecrafts which, using photographic technology, have never been proven to be false. He claims to have been taken both backward and forward in time by the Pleiadians and their allies the Dals to view various events. This contact has caused major controversy since it was revealed. Meyer had been provided with evidence by the Pleiadians themselves, such as a metal sample which was analyzed on film by a noted IBM scientist. The analysis revealed an unusual combination of materials, including a rare and expensive element called thulium. Also, when analyzed further, the sample seemed to display properties of both metal and crystal. The metal sample subsequently disappeared, but the film analysis remains. Within the UFO research community, this case is a classic example of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Because it is too easy, it is considered to be fraudulent. When Meyer attempted to construct models of Pleiadian spacecrafts to see if the photographs could be faked, the models were found, and the whole case was labeled a hoax. The teachings of the 1970s from Semjace and her associates are now beginning to be more widely known. They teach spiritual truths as well as give a partial history of the Pleiadian race. Some teachings warn of impending natural and man-made disasters connected with a new age to come. It seems that these Pleiadian beings were from an orientation in their history where warning humans about approaching cataclysm was part of their contact philosophy. Though these teachings may have been applicable when they were given, one may question how they relate to today's mass consciousness. There are indications that the mass consciousness of Earth made a shift from a future of disaster to one of increasing responsibility during the time period of 1980 to 1982. Since these Pleiadian teachings were given before the shift was made, perhaps they represent an old idea. It does not necessarily mean they are not valid, but it does mean that perhaps there is a different outlook coming to humanity instead, one which reflects the choices and changes humanity has recently made on a mass conscious level. The Pleiadian contact coming to us presently both in physical and telepathic forms may echo a different voice. Some claim to be the future descendants of Meyer's Pleiadians. These Pleiadians speak openly of their difficult past and why they felt they needed to use certain tactics in dealing with Earth. They admit to having their own motivations for contact and thank this planet for all they have learned. They are helping society to shed light on other forms of contact in which they themselves are not directly involved, such as negative abduction experiences. They are sincerely assisting humanity by whatever means they can, allowing the planet to achieve a global as well as galactic viewpoint. The Pleiadians have specific reasons for being tentative in their present interactions with Earth. For thousands of years, they have stepped in either to protect us from danger or to control us like children for our own good. Some splinter groups even manipulated humankind for its own purposes. This has been a source of great shame to them. They now realize that humanity must make its own choices and they must trust the human ability to do so. They have created a karmic cycle through their interference. For their own growth, it is imperative that this cycle be relinquished. The thought of perpetuating the pattern of interference on Earth is the single most fearful idea facing a Pleiadian. Will Pleiadian contact with Earth continue in the future? Since they are the most similar to the Earth human physically in fourth density form, it seems appropriate that they become one of the first to walk this planet undisguised. They stress, however, that as much as humanity might want to meet its cousins from the sky, they will not initiate an open contact program until humanity can embrace its brothers across the street. It is up to this planet. It is humanity who is calling the shots. Are we finally ready to let go of the fear of recognizing our heritage and accept their outstretched hands? Chapter 7. The Gateway of Arcturus. When passing through the Prism of Lyra, there were some beings who decided to remain in non-physical form. These beings lovingly chose an existence of service to those of the more dense realities, such as third-density Earth. They realized that on developing physical worlds, the evolving life may need assistance from other realms. This assistance would come in the form of archetypes, angels, guides, and unseen inspiration. These beings were attracted to the area of the star Arcturus. During their initial attraction, the star field in the Arcturus region was slightly different from its present manifestation. but the energy of the area remains constant. There is a gateway or crossroads in the fabric of time and space in the general area of Arcturus. These beings soon realized this gateway passed dimensionally through almost every other area inhabited from the dimensional infusion. It was then that they began to understand their purpose to aid consciousness from many levels of awareness. The Arcturian purpose is multifaceted. One idea is that they serve humanoid kind as an ideal. They represent the future self of an individual or a society. Their energy is, by its nature, a magnet that draws out positive potential and integration from the very depths of being. They reflect to Earth where it is heading in its evolution. Once humanity evolves into non-physicality, the ideal goal is to achieve a consciousness similar to that of the Arcturian mass consciousness. They recognize themselves as a group matrix, committed to the idea of the evolution of consciousness. Very often Arcturian beings will manifest to humans as angels. It is known that one of the purposes of an angel is to serve humankind. In a very real sense, the Arcturians have a dedication to humanoid kind. They have chosen to learn about physicality through physical beings. They are etheric in nature. Their energy can be felt as a presence, a surge of creativity or unconditional love. They will manifest according to the belief system of the person with whom they are interacting. To the more traditionally religious, it will be as angels. To some of the more modern seekers, perhaps as extraterrestrials or future selves. Either way, the outcome is the same in interaction with a truly loving being devoted to the service of physical beings and thus the whole. Because they serve physicality, they interact not only with the humanoid beings upon a planet, but also with the unseen kingdoms whose evolution is different from that of humanoids. Each planet has its own Davic kingdom, the consciousness energy of the plant, mineral, and animal kingdoms, and the Arcturian energy acts as a higher aspect of a planet's Divic kingdom. Again, they repeat the idea of reflecting the future evolutionary ideal. There are a small number of Arcturians who choose to experience physicality in order to serve. Rather than entering physicality through the birth process, they choose to walk in an already existing body on a physical world. They do not have the need or the karmic compulsion, so to speak, to enter through the incarnation process. By various agreements between souls, a trade is established. The soul of a human who is emotionally in pain will enter the Arcturus realm for healing, and the curious Arcturian will temporarily embody upon a planet. The primary service the Arcturians provide for physical beings is that of emotional healing. Arcturus is more of a realm than an actual place, and within the realm of Arcturus, Earth's souls who have had traumatic deaths or lives are healed and rejuvenated. Because the gateway of Arcturus connects dimensionally with Earth, all who incarnate on Earth must pass through the Arcturus realm before they reach the planet, unless they consciously choose not to. This provides a healing for those about to be born, and a strengthening of their choices and desires for the physical life about to occur. The gateway of Arcturus prepares non-physical consciousness for the intense focus of physicality and thus sexuality. From the Arcturian point of awareness, physicality and sexuality are the same expression. The Arcturus energy is particularly adept at various forms of sexual healing, such as in the case of sexual abuse during childhood or adulthood. The healing energies of Arcturus are equally nurturing for the abused and the abuser, for both are in much pain. The utilization of the Sirius Arcturus healing matrix can be quite powerful in such cases. The cetaceans, especially dolphins, can represent the Sirius Arcturus matrix to those in pain. Since dolphins are quite sexual and unconditionally loving in their expression, they can serve as a physical manifestation of the Sirius Arcturus healing matrix. This matrix is totally non-threatening, providing subtle healing on very deep levels. At death, the human consciousness passes through the Arcturus realm. There they are nurtured and cared for until they awaken to their greater reality. In the case of traumatic death, a great tenderness and healing is shared so that the soul about to awaken makes a smooth transition. In after-death experiences, the light that is perceived at the end of a tunnel is actually a representation of the Arcturus vibration. This vibration will be translated through the perceiver's own belief system. Because Arcturus is primarily sixth density, it is often perceived as the Christ or Buddha vibration. The light can be equated with the future or higher self-Christ self of an individual. So in a sense, During the death process, one is merging with the higher self, which happens to share a frequency range nearly identical to the Arcturus realm. Their healing occurs. In all of creation, there is nothing that heals, nurtures, and rejuvenates the human spirit as completely as the Arcturus vibration. Another idea that is synonymous with the Arcturus vibration is the idea of creativity. When one is creating, one aligns with the energy of the Creator. Since Arcturus serves as a messenger of the Creator, so to speak, the vibrations are quite similar. In this way, Arcturus has been intimately bound to humanity from the beginning, since humanity is always creating. Arcturus is much more than a star. It is a frequency that one possesses within. It is a frequency of creation, healing, and evolution. It has been with Earth and other developing physical planets from their inception. It is less a character in the galactic family story than an undercurrent one that is ever present in the entire dimensional infusion idea. Because the energy of Arcturus is an undercurrent that consistently interacts with us, the Earth planetary environment often translates Arcturan energy into a form that is meant to trigger individuals emotionally. An example of this is the lenticular cloud, a spectacular cloud formation that molds itself into a disk shape. It may look like a spacecraft, but most of the time it is merely the Earth environment translating the energy it perceives at an etheric level. These etheric ships serve once again to remind humanity of its unseen connections. Within polarized reality, Arcturus has chosen a counterpart to reflect other aspects of its evolving nature. Its counterpart is the area called Antares within the dimensional gateway, or crossroads. There is a joining between Antares and Arcturus, which serves as a major focal point of energy in this region. Most of the consciousnesses who incarnate on Earth pass only through the Arcturus vibration. There are others who choose to pass through Antares before they reach Arcturus. These are the individuals who work directly with mass consciousness patterns, matrices, and cellular evolution. Antares is also the dimensional connection point between Earth's quadrant of the Milky Way and the galaxy Andromeda. The Antares-Andromeda connection energizes the abstract concepts of existence and consciousness necessary for physical races to begin to remember their heritage, thus transmuting their past. Most of the other races explored in this work have more individualized agreements with planet Earth. The Arcturus connection is very fluid, very malleable, but no less important. If one likens all the other characters of the story to ingredients in a cosmic soup, one can see how they all add to the flavoring. However, if one likens Arcturus to the consistency of the bouillon in the soup, it is apparent how the Arcturan vibration is a vital ingredient that holds it all together. Many manifestations of the Arcturan energy on Earth can be explored. First, one can say that Arcturus and Sirius form a partnership. Whereas Arcturus works with emotional healing, Sirius facilitates physical healing. The Egyptians knew these connections and called upon the energies of the Arcturus-Sirius matrix for assistance in their rituals. The Egyptian deity known as Anubis was a direct Sirian archetype, but worked with the Arcturan energy. Anubis guided individuals into the underworld, the astral, or through the process of physical death. There, the energies of both Sirius and Arcturus began the healing process with the soul. The representation of the jackal or the dog, as in the dog star of Sirius, as Anubis, is a blatant signal that the Egyptians were aware of the connection. Anubis, as a Sirius archetype, led the departed soul to the Arcturus realm where healing occurs. Arcturus represents integration as much as Orion represents the conflicting or polarized nature of humanity. The archetype of Merlin has often been labeled a bridge. When two polarities attempt a unification, there must be a common ground they both stand on before the merging occurs. Merlin is thus a bridge between the explosive Orion and the healing Arcturus. He is the common ground. It is apparent how his energy has been of major importance, not only to Earth, but to all who experience polarity. Magic is the spark created from the friction between polarities. Tie ignites transformation. Early in the development of Earth, the Arcturans agreed to density themselves enough to be perceived temporarily. They interacted with the early culture called Lemuria by teaching healing skills. The memory of these interactions was carried throughout generations. When the Lemurians migrated to many areas of Earth, these memories were carried with them. The statues of Easter Island are one of the few ideas that remain in the physical of their direct interaction. These statues are not meant to represent these densified Arcturians so much as to pay tribute to them. The position of the statues is skyward, gazing at the horizon, waiting for the Arcturians' return. Humanity has never had to wait for their return. The energy has been present all along. If one looks inward instead of outward, they can be found. They are the human race evolved to its highest potential. They remind humanity and edge it forward into the magnificent spiral of evolution. Home is where the heart is, and the heart is the path of Arcturus. Chapter 8. Earth Inception. In whose image were Earth humans made. Many of Earth's oldest scriptures imply that human development was guided by gods who descended from the sky. Even anthropologists are aware of the unusually fast development of Homo sapiens. Some anthropologists estimate that the species Homo sapiens appears to be millions of years ahead of schedule. Whereas the evolutionary development between advanced Australopithecus and Neanderthal took more than 2 million years, evidence has been found on Earth that Homo sapiens Cro-Magnon emerged approximately 35,000 years ago. What is even more intriguing is that while the remains of man are continually discovered, archaeologists have found remains from an even earlier Homo sapiens in the areas of Western Asia and Northern Africa. These remains date back 250,000 years before Cro-Magnon man. It should be stated here that Homo sapiens has no evolutionary precursor. Nothing evolved into Homo sapiens. The species simply appeared. Would extraterrestrials be interested in having a hand in Earth's evolution? If so, what could they gain from Earth humans? Perhaps it was a way for them to accelerate their own evolution. It seems evident there were 3 main groups that orchestrated the Earth inception. We identify them as the founders, a Lyran group and a Sirian group. The founders facilitated the inception from a point of non-physicality and were the overseers of the entire project. Unaware of these non-physical influences, the Lyrans physically orchestrated the inception and employed a Sirian group to assist. Each group had its own motivations for their involvement. Though the motivations were different, the goal was the same: the creation of a humanoid race on Earth. As stated earlier, the Pleiadians involved themselves in Earth's evolution for their own benefit. They felt that if they interacted with humans, not only would they be able to be a part of the development of their previous home, but they could learn about negativity and integration without having to incarnate directly into a world that was playing out those ideas. They were persuaded by the Lyran group, who were well aware of the genetic compatibility of the Pleiadians with the new Earth humans being developed. The Lyran group, a combination of various Lyran races, was always experimenting. Just as humans have certain instinctive drives such as procreation, these extraterrestrials carry their own drives which emulate their creators, the founders. The founders' offspring instinctively carried on with genetic seeding. These founders were well aware that inbreeding would cause a race to die out, and thus they continually sought new stock to keep the gene pool mixed. There was another primary Lyran motivation for their involvement with Earth. After eons of conflict within the Lyran offshoot races Vega, Sirius, Orion, etc., they were tired of creating civilizations that were polarized and failed to exist peacefully. They were determined that Earth was to be a planet founded on integration rather than polarity. The Lyran group felt that perhaps what they needed all along was a planet whose beginnings were integrated rather than one that was carrying the seeds of polarity from other star systems. With this in mind, they began formulating their rigid plan for the Earth inception. The founders, however, had other plans. They knew Earth was possibly going to be the final ground for healing the Orion drama, and therefore must remain polarized in order to resolve the conflict. The founders knew that the Galactic family might finally learn about integration through the experience of polarity resolution on Earth. The founders allowed the Lyran group to carry out their plan because they knew it would eventually support the cosmic plan. As for the Sirian group, their motivations were much closer to home. They considered Earth to be within the Sirius trinary star system, thus they believed they had a right to manipulate Earth genetics. The Sirians were interested simply in establishing primitive humanoid races on Earth that could serve as manual laborers while they expanded their colonies to include Earth. Thus they supported the Lyran project with their own goals in mind. The Earth Inception project began. For many thousands of years during the early phases of the Earth Inception project, the Lyrans 3 watched the developing primate race on Earth with cautious eyes. Occasionally they took samples and made slight alterations to the DNA structures. At critical points in development, they began inserting genetic material from the Pleiadians and other groups into these primates. Over long periods, it became increasingly apparent that evolution was accelerating at a rapid pace. When this became evident, the crucial prototype experiments were initiated. These Lyrans, as well as others, have been known by the Hebrew term Nephilim, erroneously translated as giants. Nephilim literally means those who have come down. Genesis 6:4 states the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. The original Hebrew term translated as renown is Shem, which literally means airborne vehicle, possibly rocket ship. Hence, they were the heroes of old, people of the rocket ships. The story of Adam and Eve is one of the few legacies left that can subtly remind humanity of its beginnings. The tale contains many symbolic references to the saga that occurred concerning the type of species who were to inherit the earth. As stated, the Lyran group wanted a species founded on integration. Therefore, they felt that the species must have no knowledge of polarity or good and evil. They strictly controlled the environment of these new humans so they would stay focused on developing as perfect vehicles of integration. They did not want the new humans to become like them, polarized. What the Lyran group did not acknowledge was that they were also restricting choice on the part of these new humans. After generations of working with primates and extraterrestrial genetics, the Lyran group developed a human prototype whose meaning of the Earth has been translated into the name Adam. The Adam prototype was introduced on Earth to test its environmental adaptability in many areas of the planet. There were many Adams. When this prototype was satisfactorily adapted, the Adams were recalled. So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and he slept. Then he took one of his ribs or part of his side, and closed up the flesh at that place through cloning and genetic engineering. A female prototype was created that is translated as Eve. Both were returned to the environment and watched closely. Out of their desire to create a species that had no knowledge of polarity, the Lyrans instructed all who tended the prototypes to forbid them knowledge, to actually deny them the right of choice which all divine beings are granted. Hence, one can see the meaning of the statement by God, "From any tree of the garden you may eat freely, but from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil polarity you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat from it you shall surely die." 4. The Sirians working with the Lyran group disagreed with this philosophy. They felt the Lyrans' personal desires for creating this species was misaligned with the rights of humanoid forms. These Sirians, although wanting to develop the human race for their own purposes, discovered they had a genuine affection for the new humans. Despite this duality, they decided to intervene, thus inadvertently giving humans the opportunity to choose. The Sirian group warned the humans, and the serpent said to the woman, "You surely shall not die. For God knows that in the day you eat from it your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Being presented with choice and the need for a decision involving their existence, the humans achieved third density consciousness. When the humans realized they had been deceived by God, they opted for knowledge. Once they made the choice to receive knowledge of polarity, they were fully anchored in the physical. They now possessed ego, or knowledge of I am, and became self-aware. Then the Lord God said, "Behold, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil polarity. He must not be allowed to reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat, and live forever." Needless to say, the Lyran group was not pleased. In their anger, they denied humans knowledge from the tree of life divine heritage. The human race was thus forced to develop without the knowledge of its connection to the galactic family and the whole. It would truly be a challenge. To ensure that the humans did not seek this knowledge, the Lyran group employed some precautions. At the east of the garden he stationed the cherubim and the flaming sword which turned every direction to guard the way to the tree of life. They left humanity its heritage, the legacy of Orion symbolically portrayed as the sword, without leaving any knowledge of its resolution. There are suggestions in the ancient Sumerian texts that the cherubim are actual mechanical or robotic devices which, in this case, protect the tree of life. What is the literal translation of the tree of life? In Sumerian, the word for the tree of life was gish.til. Gish meant a man-made device, til meant and still does today in contemporary Hebrew missal. Instead of an actual tree, this may mean the vehicle to life or a spaceship. In Sumerian renderings, there are clear depictions of rocket ships, as well as men saluting these rocket ships. It seems clear that the action by the gods of stationing the cherubim to keep humans from the tree of life was actually denying the humans the knowledge of their heritage. No longer would the Earth human be allowed to openly intermingle with the gods or leave the planet with them. Humans were banished from the heavens. What happened to the Sirian group who interfered with the plans of the Lyrans? By interfering, they became energetically tied to the development of Earth. They have always had many tricks up their sleeve, and in this case they got the last laugh. When working with the Lyran group during the genetic program, they inserted a latent DNA code within the human cells. This code is triggered by an accelerating vibration that occurs when a civilization begins to evolve spiritually. As Earth accelerates towards self-awareness and fourth density, which is occurring presently, the code is activated. Once activated, the human race unwinds its limited vision like a coil until the expanse of all that is becomes visible. It was their way of allowing humanity to eat from the tree of life after all. From these early seeders of planet Earth, humanity has been left a challenge. As stated, the children who are seeded usually carry the genetic codes and deep-seated attitudes of the parents. If indeed Earth was seeded from a point of inequality and lack of free will, but might this not explain why humans of many races today still carry an underlying belief in the superiority of the Caucasian Aryan race, the Lyran group? Could it be that the very roots of racial bigotry go as far back as the seeding of the planet? The earliest texts available to the seeker certainly suggest this. The Sumerian records give reference to the black-headed ones who worked the mines of Africa for the gods. If this is the case that humanity carries the patterns of its forefathers, then this challenge is just beginning. Breaking free from this god spell that has been cast over humanity may be the key to the liberation of the human race on Earth. In Earth's past, the human race has received conflicting signals from the gods. There were times, some of which are recorded in the Sumerian texts, such as the Great Flood, when humans were abandoned and left to die on the planet while the gods they trusted left in their spaceships. During these times, some gods illegally rescued chosen humans. This has created an emotional encoding within the human species during times of crisis. The encoding remembers both of these patterns, and a struggle is activated between the fear of abandonment and the joy of salvation. It is imperative that the human race resolve this dependence on the gods and become self-sufficient. On present-day Earth, extraterrestrial groups, whose encodings are rooted in the past, still promise salvation. They come to humans as physical space beings or speak telepathically to those who can hear their frequency. Often they name various Earth humans commanders or chosen ones and continue to tempt the human ego to perpetuate their own feelings of superiority. Though these off-planet groups mean well for the most part, they continually perpetuate the gap between the fear of abandonment and the joy of salvation, thus encouraging the separative belief in elitism. As humans take their own power and enter planetary adulthood, those remnant groups will transform as well. The majority of other extraterrestrial groups have learned from their past actions and desire a resolution of this conflict once and for all. From the point of view of the founders, the plan was continuing perfectly. The Lyran group needed to play out the scenario for their own growth. These early extraterrestrial gods left behind clues on Earth that will eventually assist in awakening the planet to its heritage. As humanity awakens to this knowledge, it will begin to bring into play the tools that are needed to resolve the Orion drama. Resolution comes from allowance. If the human race can truly allow diversity within unity from a point of non-judgment, heaven on Earth will be created. Welcome to the 30-minute Power Summary series of books to awaken your soul. This is a summary of the key teachings of the Law and the Promise. Written by Neville Goddard in 1961. Neville Goddard, in his book The Law and the Promise, presents a compelling exploration of the power of imagination and its role in shaping our reality. Through a series of insightful teachings and personal anecdotes, he unveils the principles of manifestation and guides us towards a deeper understanding of our own creative potential. Chapter 1: The Law Imagining Creates Reality. The core principle of the book is established in the first chapter, Imagining Creates Reality. Goddard draws inspiration from William Blake, who believed that man is all imagination and that God is man and exists in us and we in him. This concept posits that our imagination is not merely a tool for daydreaming or fantasy, but the very essence of our being and the source of our creative power. Goddard emphasizes that the world we perceive is a product of our collective imagination, shaped by our beliefs and assumptions. He distinguishes between divine imagining and human imagining not as separate powers, but as varying degrees of intensity within the same creative force. When we imagine with intensity and conviction, our imaginal acts become objective facts in our reality. However, when our imagination is weak or doubtful, our desires manifest through a slower, more gradual process. The key to harnessing the power of imagination lies in self-abandonment, fully immersing ourselves in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. By entering the imagined state and experiencing it with all our senses, we create a bridge of incidents that leads to its manifestation in our physical reality. Chapter 2: Dwell Therein. This chapter explores the concept of dwelling in the state of the wish fulfilled. Goddard emphasizes the importance of living in the end, experiencing the feeling of having already achieved our desires. He shares several inspiring stories of individuals who manifested their dreams by persistently imagining and feeling as if their wishes were already a reality. One story tells of a doctor and his wife who dreamt of building an apartment building on their property for 15 years. By creating a detailed mental image of the completed building and experiencing the joy of its realization, they attracted a series of seemingly coincidental events that led to the manifestation of their dream. Another story tells of a woman who desired a specific type of house for her family. Through nightly visualizations of sleeping in her dream home, she eventually found and purchased the exact house she had imagined. Chapter 3: Turn the Wheel Backward. This chapter introduces the concept of revision as a powerful tool for changing our past and therefore our present and future. Goddard explains that our past experiences are not fixed and unalterable, but rather exist as imaginal constructs that can be revised and transformed. By revisiting past events in our imagination and replaying them in a way that aligns with our desires, we can effectively rewrite our history and create a new present reality. One story tells of a woman who suffered from chronic back pain for 39 years due to a childhood accident. By revising the memory of the accident in her imagination, she was able to completely heal her back and eliminate the pain. Another story tells of a woman who faced a lawsuit and a seemingly impossible legal situation. By focusing on the desired outcome in her imagination and hearing the words "not guilty" repeatedly, she influenced the jury's decision and won her case. Chapter 4: There is no fiction. This chapter delves deeper into the concept of imagining creates reality, emphasizing that there is no distinction between fiction and reality in the realm of imagination. Goddard shares the story of the Titanic and its eerie resemblance to a fictional account of a similar ship sinking, written 14 years prior. This example demonstrates how our imaginal activities, even those seemingly fantastical, can ultimately manifest as physical reality. Chapter 5: Subtle Threads. This chapter explores the subtle and often unseen ways in which our imaginal activities influence the world around us. Goddard shares stories of individuals who manifested unexpected financial windfalls, found lost objects, and even influenced the behavior of others through the power of their imagination. He emphasizes that once we set our intention and commit to our imaginal acts, the universe conspires to bring about the desired outcome, often through unexpected and seemingly miraculous ways. How to apply these teachings. Here are some key steps to applying the principles of the law and the promise in your own life. Identify your desires. Get clear about what you truly want to manifest in your life. Create a vivid mental image. Visualize your desire as already fulfilled, engaging all your senses to make the experience as real as possible. Enter the state of the wish fulfilled. Imagine yourself being in the situation you desire, feeling the emotions, and performing the actions you would experience if it were already real. Persist and be patient. Repeat your imaginal act regularly and trust in the process of manifestation. Let go of doubts and anxieties and have faith that your desire will manifest in its own perfect time. Revise your past. Revisit past experiences in your imagination and revise them to align with your current desires. This will help to clear any limiting beliefs or negative emotions that may be blocking your progress. Alive from the end act and behave as if your desire is already a reality. This will help to align your thoughts, feelings, and actions with the frequency of your desire, accelerating its manifestation. By practicing these principles with dedication and faith, you can harness the power of your imagination to create a life filled with joy, abundance, and fulfillment. Mastering the Art of Imagination, a deep dive into the law, and the Promise chapters 6 to 10. As we continue our exploration of the law and the Promise, Neville Goddard delves further into the intricacies of imagination and its role in shaping our reality. These chapters provide valuable insights into the nature of vision, the power of moods, and the importance of entering into the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Chapter 6: Visionary Fancy. This chapter explores the concept of visionary fancy, which Goddard describes as the ability to create and sustain images in the mind that transcend the limitations of our physical senses. He emphasizes that these imaginal images are the true realities, while their physical manifestations are merely shadows or reflections. By holding on to our visions with unwavering faith, we can bring them into being in our physical world. One story tells of a music enthusiast who desired a rare and out-of-print opera recording. By repeatedly visualizing himself asking for and receiving the record from a specific salesman, he was able to manifest the album despite being told it was unavailable. Another story tells of a woman who dreamt of visiting the Caribbean. While recovering in the hospital, she immersed herself in the experience of taking a cruise, visualizing every detail of the journey. Months later, she unexpectedly won a contest that awarded her the exact cruise she had imagined. Chapter 7: Moods. This chapter explores the power of moods in shaping our reality. Goddard explains that our moods are not simply reactions to external circumstances, but rather causative agents that attract and create experiences that correspond with their vibrational frequency. By consciously cultivating positive and desirable moods, we can attract positive and desirable experiences into our lives. One story tells of a woman who was facing financial hardship and unemployment. By focusing on the feeling of something wonderful is happening to me now, she shifted her mood and attracted a large sum of money from an unexpected source. Another story tells of a mother who used her imagination to heal her son's warts. By purchasing the warts from him and playfully claiming them as her own, she created a shift in his belief system that led to the disappearance of the warts. Chapter 8: Through the Looking Glass. This chapter delves deeper into the concept of shifting our awareness to create new realities. Goddard explains that we are not bound by the limitations of our physical senses, but can transcend them through the power of imagination. By focusing our attention on the desired state and experiencing it as if it were already real, we can shift our consciousness and enter into a new reality. One story tells of a woman suffering from a debilitating illness who used a postcard of a beach scene to transport herself to a state of health and well-being. By repeatedly visualizing herself running freely on the beach, she eventually experienced a miraculous healing and regained her mobility. Another story tells of a mother who was able to visit her daughter in England through the power of her imagination. By vividly imagining herself being in her daughter's living room, she was able to project her consciousness across the distance and appear to her daughter in a vision. Chapter 9: Enter into. This chapter emphasizes the importance of entering into the image of the wish fulfilled. Goddard explains that by mentally entering the imagined scene and experiencing it with all our senses, we give it substance and power, making its manifestation in our physical reality more likely. One story tells of a couple who were struggling to sell their 3-story house. By imagining themselves sleeping in their new 1-story house and experiencing it as their current reality, they were able to quickly sell their old house and move into their desired home. Another story tells of a woman who longed to visit Europe. By repeatedly visualizing herself standing outside the gates of Buckingham Palace in London, she eventually manifested a teaching fellowship for her husband at a university in England, fulfilling her dream of living in Europe. Chapter 10: Things which do not appear. This chapter explores the idea that what is seen was made out of things which do not appear. Goddard emphasizes that the physical world is a manifestation of our inner imaginal activity, and that by changing our thoughts and beliefs, we can change our reality. One story tells of a grandmother who used her imagination to connect with her granddaughter who lived far away. By visualizing herself holding and talking to her granddaughter each day, she created a strong bond and influenced her granddaughter's thoughts and feelings. Another story tells of a woman who used her imagination to transform a troubled student in her husband's school. By visualizing the boy as a happy and well-adjusted child, she helped to create a positive shift in his behavior and improve the situation at school. Shaping reality with the potter within, a deep dive into the law and the promise. As we delve into the final chapters of the law and the promise, Neville Goddard guides us towards the pinnacle of his teachings, unveiling the mystical experience of self-realization and the profound transformation it brings. These chapters explore the concept of the potter, the significance of our attitudes, and the culmination of the spiritual journey in the fulfillment of God's promise. Chapter 11, The Potter. This chapter introduces the concept of the potter, drawing upon the biblical analogy of God as the potter who molds and shapes clay. Goddard explains that the potter represents our imagination, the creative force within us that shapes our reality. Just as the potter can rework and transform clay into any form, our imagination has the power to reshape our experiences and create new realities. He emphasizes that the potter or imagination is not separate from God, but rather the very essence of God within us. He states, imagination is the real man and is one with God. This means that our creative power is divine in nature, and by using our imagination consciously and deliberately, we are participating in the act of creation itself. Goddard further explains that imagination operates in three ways. Creative imagination: when we imagine without relying on past experiences or sensory data, we are engaging in pure creation, bringing forth new possibilities and realities. Conservative imagination: when we imagine based on memories and past experiences, we are recreating and perpetuating existing patterns and realities. Transformative imagination: when we revise and alter existing memories and experiences in our imagination, we are transforming our past and shaping a new future. Chapter 12, Attitudes. This chapter explores the profound impact of our attitudes on our experience of reality. Goddard explains that our attitudes act as filters through which we perceive the world, shaping our thoughts, feelings, and actions. By changing our attitudes, we can change our perception of reality and ultimately, our experiences. He shares the story of a man who harbored a deep resentment towards beggars due to a past experience. By revising his attitude and imagining himself giving generously to a beggar, he was able to release his negativity and experience a shift in his reality, encountering the same beggar months later who had turned his life around and found a job. Chapter 13, All Trivia. This chapter emphasizes the importance of using our imagination even for seemingly trivial desires. Goddard explains that by focusing our imagination on specific and well-defined goals, even small ones, we strengthen our ability to create and manifest our desires. He shares stories of individuals who manifested a desired hat, influenced the behavior of birds, and attracted a specific painting into their lives through the power of their imagination. Chapter 14, The Creative Moment. This chapter explores the concept of the creative moment, the point in time when our imagination takes hold and sets in motion the events that lead to the fulfillment of our desires. Goddard explains that this moment occurs when we shift from reacting to life to actively creating it, when we step out of the role of the observer and become the conscious creator of our experience. He shares a story of a woman who witnessed her imaginal act manifest almost instantaneously. While driving, she imagined offering a ride to an elderly lady who had just missed her bus. Moments later, the exact same woman appeared at her car window and asked for a ride. Chapter 15, The Promise for Mystical Experiences. This chapter delves into the mystical experience of self-realization and the fulfillment of God's promise to humanity. Goddard shares 4 of his own personal mystical experiences, revealing the truth of our divine nature and the path towards awakening as God. He describes his experiences of entering a divine society, encountering the embodiments of infinite might and love, and ultimately realizing his own identity as the father of David, the Lord's anointed. These experiences reveal the profound truth that God and human imagination are one, and that our ultimate purpose is to awaken to our divine nature and become co-creators with God. How to apply these teachings. Here are some key steps to applying the principles of these chapters. Recognize the potter within, become aware of your imagination as the creative force within you, and take responsibility for the images and beliefs you hold in your mind. Shift your attitudes, examine your current attitudes and beliefs, and consciously choose to adopt those that support your desires and well-being. Focus on specifics, define your desires clearly, and create vivid mental images of them as already fulfilled. Be present and act in the now. Enter the creative moment by focusing on the present moment and taking action based on your desired reality, rather than reacting to external circumstances. Embrace the mystery, be open to the unknown, and trust in the process of self-discovery and spiritual growth. By applying these principles and engaging in the practice of self-inquiry and imagination, you can awaken to the truth of your being and fulfill your divine potential as a co-creator with God.